Imagine for a second, right, that you are walking down this incredibly crowded city sidewalk.
Okay, yeah.
Like it's a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
You are entirely focused on your destination.
Just completely in the zone.
Right. You're moving with purpose. Maybe you're checking your watch, or maybe you're rehearsing some difficult conversation in your head.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Or honestly, maybe you're just trying to get out of the cold. But you are completely convinced in your own mind that the street is essentially empty.
Which is wild because it's not.
Exactly. It's packed. You're stepping around people. You're dodging a guy selling fruit from a cart, brushing past a group of teenagers waiting for the bus.
Right.
But you don't actually see a single one of them. You are moving through this living, breathing, just incredibly complex world. But to you, it's just a blank space between point A and point B.
It's a striking image to start with,
Uh,
and it perfectly captures this profound disconnect that is just happening all the time.
all the time, yeah.
We occupy physical spaces constantly, but we rarely actually inhabit them. Like, our bodies are taking up room, but our awareness, our curiosity is just entirely absent.
And that image, that really unsettling idea of like walking blind through a crowded room, that is right at the heart of what we are doing today. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
If you're listening to this, you are probably someone who wants to understand the deeper, more complex layers of community, of leadership, and really just genuine human connection.
Right, you want to know how things actually work under the surface.
Exactly. But you don't want to get bogged down in abstract theory. You want the real, practical truth about how we relate to the places we live and, the people we live next to.
And the source material we're unpacking today delivers exactly that, though it comes from a perspective you might not expect.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
It is. It's a deeply insightful, highly theological manuscript. It's titled, Seeing the Mission Field with the Eyes of Christ.
A really quick note on that title, just to frame this for you. This text was originally written for churches, for ministries, basically faith-based organizations trying to engage with their communities.
Right.
But as we read through it, what immediately became apparent is that the core truths it uncovers about human connection, about our blindness, about attention.
They apply to absolutely anyone.
Literally anyone. Whether you are leading a massive tech company or running a local nonprofit, or honestly just trying to be a decent neighbor on your block, this framework fundamentally changes how you look at the world.
It really does, because the manuscript addresses this universal crisis of perception. The whole mission of this deep dive is to explore a very uncomfortable reality.
Yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. Why is it that so many well-meaning initiatives, whether that's a church ministry, a community outreach program, or a completely secular neighborhood nonprofit,
Right.
why do they so often fail spectacularly? We're going to look at how to cure this blindness we all suffer from.
Because we have to learn how to stop treating people as projects.
Exactly. Or as data points. And instead, we have to learn how to truly see the invisible architecture of the communities we actually live in.
So think about this.
Yeah.
What if the greatest obstacle to making an actual impact in the world isn't the resistance of the world itself? What if the greatest obstacle is our own inability to see what is right in front of us?
I mean, that's the kicker. The author of our source text begins by pointing out that an organization, and let's just use a church as the primary example since the text does.
Right. Makes sense.
A church can stand for decades in the exact middle of a neighborhood and still remain a complete stranger to it.
Decades.
Decades. The author separates intention from perception.
Oh, that's good. Unpack that.
So we often assume that if we mean well, if we're working hard, then we naturally understand the environment we're working in.
Like, I'm doing good things, so I must get it.
Right. But a church or a nonprofit can sing with conviction, organize with just incredible diligence, and pray with absolute sincerity while scarcely noticing the people who live, work, suffer, and hope within walking distance of its own doors.
Yeah, the text gives these incredibly vivid, honestly haunting examples of what this blindness looks like on, say, a random Tuesday.
Yeah, the imagery is powerful.
It really is. It says the school children passing by the building are just unnamed. The vendors working at the roadside are just faceless scenery.
Just props.
Literally props. And the mothers in the informal settlement down the street are assumed.
Assumed. That's a heavy word.
It is, meaning the organization just assumes it knows what their lives are like without ever actually sitting down to ask them. And the elderly folks in the apartment blocks.
Yeah.
Completely ignored.
Which brings up the central concept in the text of instrumentalization.
Okay, yes. Instrumentalization.
Yeah, it's the subtle, often totally unintentional sin of treating people as a means to an end. It's the managerial mindset applied to human souls. It's what happens when people are reduced to categories just to make our jobs easier.
Right, so a neighborhood ceases to be this complex web of human lives and instead becomes
A target area.
a target area, right?
And the youth in the community are no longer seen as teenagers navigating the terrifying waters of adolescence. They become uh, engagement metrics.
Engagement metrics. Ugh.
Right. And the poor are no longer neighbors to be known. They are outreach opportunities.
Okay, let's just unpack this for a second. Instrumentalization. It sounds so clinical.
Very cold.
It's treating people like raw material for your organization's success.
And the real danger is that it doesn't feel malicious, like at all.
No, it feels strategic.
Exactly. You're sitting in a boardroom, you're looking at a whiteboard, you're feeling very smart about how you are going to deploy your resources.
Right, you're optimizing.
But sincerity without actual sight leads to blunt, harmful interaction. You can be the most sincere person in the world, but if you don't actually see the person in front of you, your help might actually feel like an intrusion.
That's a huge point.
You're trying to solve a problem they might not even have while entirely missing the incredibly heavy burden they are actually carrying.
You know, it's like using a GPS that only shows your final destination but completely ignores the actual terrain.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You know where you want to end up, say a thriving, connected community. But your screen doesn't show the roadblocks or the weather or the traffic or the washed out bridges.
You're just blindly following the blue line.
Exactly. You are driving confidently because you're sincere and you have a noble goal, but because you are ignoring the reality of the landscape, you are inevitably going to crash.
And if we stretch that GPS analogy just a bit further, what happens when the map hasn't been updated in 5 years?
Oh man, you drive right into a lake.
You end up driving your car straight into a lake. That's exactly what happens when organizations rely on outdated assumptions about a neighborhood instead of actually walking the streets.
Because the landscape is not neutral.
No, not at all. A community is not a blank canvas waiting for an organization to arrive and paint a masterpiece on it. The text argues that when we operate with this blind sincerity, we only notice what confirms our pre-existing assumptions.
Right.
We look at a neighborhood, and if our program is designed to fix problem X, we will suddenly see problem X absolutely everywhere.
Because to a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly. And in the process, we completely ignore problems Y and Z, which might actually be the devastating crises destroying people's lives.
So we basically see what we are programmed to see. The text says that we have noticed what confirms our assumptions and overlooked what would require us to change.
That is a massive indictment.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to think about the psychology behind that. If we truly saw the community, if we really took off the blinders, we might have to scrap our entire strategic plan.
We might have to lay off our consultants.
Yeah. And admit we were wrong.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to do that.
It is just so much easier to maintain our blindness because it preserves our programs, it preserves our budgets, and our sense of expertise.
Wow.
But the author insists that sincerity is simply not enough. Treating people as abstract projects fails because it is fundamentally at odds with how the source text says God operates.
Right, which shifts the whole conversation into a totally different paradigm. Because if abstract, generalized, one-size-fits-all ministry is the problem, what is the solution?
Right.
According to the manuscript, the answer lies in understanding how God actually interacts with humanity. And he doesn't do it from a detached boardroom.
Definitely not.
He does it through hyper-specific, concrete reality.
And the text introduces this as the biblical meaning of place.
Okay, the biblical meaning of place.
It's this theological argument that geography, culture, and location are not accidental details to be ignored. They are essential to how truth is communicated.
That makes a lot of sense.
The author points out that while the gospel is universal in its scope, like it is for everyone, it is never, ever generic.
It's never a mass-produced widget that you can just buy off the shelf.
Exactly. God does not save people in the abstract. When you look at the biblical narrative, God is entirely invested in specific places.
Right.
He calls Abraham to a very specific physical land. He forms Israel not in some theoretical classroom, but in a highly specific, brutal wilderness.
With real sand and real rocks.
Real sand, real first. He sends prophets to real cities with real political structures and real economic injustices. And the ultimate example of this, the text points out, is the incarnation.
Right. Jesus wasn't a floating spiritual concept giving TED Talks from the clouds.
No.
He was born into the highly specific, incredibly layered reality of first-century Palestine.
I mean, think about the texture of that reality. Jesus spoke a specific regional language, Aramaic. He lived under a specific, incredibly oppressive political regime, the Roman occupation. He had to deal with local tax collectors, religious factions, and the daily rhythms of an agricultural and fishing economy.
It's all so grounded.
The author argues that this is not incidental background scenery. The fact that the Word became flesh means that truth, in the Christian worldview, must always be embodied locally.
Local.
God does not bypass the neighborhood texture of human life. He inhabits it.
Okay, but wait, let me push back on this for a second.
Sure, go for it.
Because in the modern world, across literally every sector, business, nonprofits, tech, and yes, even church planting, the ultimate goal is always scale. We want to maximize impact.
Yeah.
So if a community outreach program works brilliantly in City A and it demonstrably changes lives,
Yeah.
why shouldn't we just franchise it?
No, I see where you're going.
Like, why shouldn't we just copy-paste that exact model into City B? Why reinvent the wheel if the core message and the core human needs are basically the same everywhere?
Well, the author directly addresses that tension by defining what they call the sin of placeless ministry.
The sin of placeless ministry.
Yeah. Your pushback relies on the assumption that City A and City B are fundamentally the same, just with different zip codes.
Right. People are people.
But the text argues that a neighborhood is never a blank slate. It is a living, breathing social ecosystem.
A social ecosystem.
And think of a biological ecosystem. You cannot take a plant that thrives in a desert ecosystem and just drop it into a rainforest expecting it to flourish just because it's a good plant.
Well, it's going to drown.
The soil is different. The humidity is different. A neighborhood is exactly the same way. It has its own inherited memory.
Road memory, yeah.
It has visible boundaries, like a massive 6-lane highway that cuts off one side of town from the grocery stores. And it has invisible boundaries, like historic class divides or racial tensions that dictate who talks to whom.
Right, the stuff you don't see on Google Maps.
Exactly. It has specific localized wounds. It has complex relational webs that dictate who actually holds the trust of the community.
So when you try to franchise a ministry model,
When you try to force a standardized, generic model onto a new community, the text argues it is actually a form of theological failure.
that's strong.
It is. It ignores the pattern of the incarnation. You are saying, in effect, our standardized model is more important than your specific reality. You are treating the community as an audience to be managed, rather than as neighbors to be known.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate here again.
Let's hear it.
Let's say I'm running a nonprofit. I understand that the social ecosystem is different. I get it. But I also have a budget, I have limited staff, and I know for a fact that my after-school tutoring program raised test scores by 40% in the last city.
Right.
Am I really supposed to just toss out a proven methodology just because the new city has a different inherited memory? Isn't that letting perfect be the enemy of good?
That is the exact friction every leader feels. But if you play this out in the real world, forcing a placeless model usually ends in one of two disasters.
Yeah, what's the first one?
First, the organization becomes wildly inefficient. Let's take your tutoring program. You launch it in the new city expecting the same 40% bump. But nobody shows up.
Why not?
Because you didn't realize that in this specific neighborhood, the primary issue isn't academic resources. It's that the kids are taking care of their younger siblings while their parents work second shifts.
Oh, wow.
Your tutoring program is answering a question no one in the neighborhood is actually asking. You just spent millions of dollars solving the wrong problem.
Okay, that makes total sense. You burn through resources. So what is the second disaster?
It breeds deep, lingering distrust. People are highly perceptive. Local residents can instantly sense when they are being treated as a demographic target rather than as human beings.
They know when there are projects?
They do.
Yeah.
They know when a program has been imported rather than grown organically. The psychology of a local resident watching an outside organization roll in with a flashy prepackaged program is fascinating. It feels arrogant. It feels colonial. And when they sense that they are just the audience for your franchised success story, They will close themselves off entirely.
It is just so countercultural to the way we are taught to lead and grow organizations today.
Oh, completely.
We are taught to look for the hack, right, the replicable system.
Mm-hmm.
But the source is saying, no, you have to be deeply, stubbornly rooted in your specific physical location.
You have to interpret the pain, the joy, and the needs of that specific location without relying on shortcuts.
So if we agree with that, if we agree that we can't just copy-paste solutions and we really have to read the local terrain, how do we actually do it?
Yeah, that's the big question.
How do we correctly interpret a neighborhood without projecting all of our own biases all over it? If our normal vision is blurred by our assumptions, how do we fix our eyes?
The author argues that we have to fundamentally change the actual lens through which we look at the world. And this introduces one of the most profound paradigm shifts in the entire manuscript.
I love this part.
Compassion as a way of knowing.
Because normally, when we talk about compassion, we think of it as a feeling. It's a reaction, right?
Right.
Like, I see someone sleeping on a park bench in the freezing rain. I assess the situation. I understand they are cold and hungry. And then I feel compassion for them. It happens after the observation.
That is the standard modern definition. We analyze a situation, we assess it, and if it meets our criteria for sympathy, we generate an emotional response called compassion.
Yeah.
But the text argues that in the life of Christ, compassion is not something that happens after he understands the situation. Compassion is how he understands the situation in the first place.
Wait, so it's the lens itself, not the reaction to what the lens sees.
Exactly. The text references Matthew chapter 9, verse 36, which is this really pivotal moment. It says, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. The author points out the sequence here. Jesus doesn't look at the crowd with cold, detached clinical analysis, run the demographic data, and then decide to feel bad for them.
Right.
His sight is already burdened with mercy. His perception is not neutral. It is compassionate.
So compassion is actually an epistemological tool.
The author uses that exact philosophical concept. Epistemology is the study of how we know things, how we acquire knowledge, what makes a fact a fact.
Hey.
The text argues that detached clinical observation actually misses the truth of human suffering.
That is so counterintuitive to how we're taught to analyze data.
Right, because if you look at a community purely through data points, median income, crime rates, demographic shifts, you might think you have objective knowledge, but you are actually blind to the deepest realities of those people's lives.
Because data doesn't bleed.
Nope.
A spreadsheet doesn't cry itself to sleep. You can know that a zip code has a 20% unemployment rate, but that data point doesn't tell you anything about the crushing shame a father feels when he can't buy his daughter a birthday present.
Exactly. Compassion in this biblical sense isn't soft, squishy sentimentality. We often confuse compassion with just being nice.
Yeah, being sweet.
But true compassion is a profound, piercing moral clarity. It is a refusal to turn away from pain. It shifts our primary question from what is happening here to what is happening to this person.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, because I was trying to visualize how this works practically.
Yeah.
And I thought about it like this. Compassion acts like spiritual night vision goggles.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. If you walk into a dark forest with your naked eyes, you just see shadows. You see obstacles. You might see threats. But when you put on night vision goggles, suddenly things hidden in the dark light up. You can see the heat signatures of living things.
Right, changes in everything.
When you put on the lens of compassion, the behavior of the people around you is suddenly illuminated in a totally new way. You realize that a teenager's withdrawal and bad attitude isn't just apathy. The goggles show you it's actually grief.
Wow, yes.
A neighbor's constant explosive anger isn't just rebellion or toxicity. The goggles show you it's deep, unprocessed pain. The silence of a community isn't stubborn resistance. It's shame.
And if we look at the alternative, trying to operate without those goggles is like trying to read a novel while someone is flashing a strobe light in your eyes.
Good luck with that.
Right.
Yeah.
You might catch a word here or there, but the narrative is entirely lost, and you end up just exhausted and confused. Without that compassionate epistemology, you will misdiagnose every single one of those behaviors.
It really will.
You will punish the teenager for apathy, you will fight the neighbor for their anger, and you will abandon the silent community for being resistant. You will do immense damage, all while being perfectly sincere because your vision was clinically detached rather than compassionately engaged.
The source material gives some incredible ancient examples of this kind of sight. It dives into the story of Hagar from the book of Genesis, chapter 16. For those who aren't familiar, this is a really heavy story.
It is a crucial text for the author's argument. Hagar is an Egyptian servant, a slave to Abraham and Sarah. She is caught in a web of ancient Near East power dynamics and abuse that she did absolutely nothing to create. She's used as a surrogate, mistreated when tensions rise, and eventually flees into the brutal wilderness, pregnant, alone, and entirely exposed.
Just a horrific situation.
She is a definition of marginalized and discarded by the system.
And in the middle of that desert, she has an encounter with God.
She does. And out of that encounter, she gives God a name. She calls him El Roi, which translates to the God who sees me.
The God who sees me.
The author draws a massive theological conclusion from this, which translates perfectly into a universal sociological truth. God does not see the way human beings see.
Wow, so?
Human sight is selective. It is status-driven. We tend to see the powerful, the wealthy, the useful, the people who can advance our careers or our organizations. But God's sight is drawn to the forgotten. He sees the servant left exposed in the desert.
If you translate that into universal leadership terms, it's really about the fundamental human need for recognition. We all want to be seen, not just perceived, but truly seen. And the people who are ignored by the system, the lower level employees, the marginalized neighbors, they crave that recognition the absolute most.
The text connects Hagar in the Old Testament to how Jesus operates in the New Testament. Think about Jesus walking through Jericho.
Yeah, okay.
He's surrounded by a massive, pressing crowd. It is total chaos, but who does he actually see? He looks up into a sycamore tree and sees Zacchaeus,
The tax collector.
a despised, corrupt tax collector who is hated by the entire city. Jesus sees him not as a nuisance, but as a person.
Right.
Later, Jesus is in the temple, surrounded by wealthy religious elites making huge, ostentatious donations, like the ancient equivalent of naming rights on a hospital wing.
Flashing the big checks.
Exactly. But who does he see? He sees a poor widow quietly dropping 2 tiny, almost worthless coins into the treasury.
He just possesses this radical ability to focus on the individual who's carrying the heaviest, most hidden burden, regardless of the noise around him.
So if compassion is the lens we need to see clearly, these night vision goggles you described, why is it so hard to just put them on? What is actively stopping us from seeing the widow or the teenager in our own lives?
Well, that brings us to the currency of the modern world, doesn't it? Distraction. And just the sheer exhaustion of trying to pay attention.
The author makes a very bold claim here. They state that attention is one of the rarest and most necessary virtues in ministry today.
It is a profound diagnosis. I mean, we live in an era of unprecedented fragmentation.
Unprecedented.
Our information comes to us in 15-second videos. Our days are sliced into ribbons by constant push notifications, emails, texts, breaking news alerts. The text says that distraction has essentially become our baseline state of existence.
It's just the water we swim in.
Yeah. We are skimming our conversations, we are skimming our relationships, and we are skimming our neighborhoods. If you're listening to this on your commute right now, think about the neighborhood you are driving through. Are you really seeing it, or are you just skimming it?
The spiritual and relational tragedy is that deep connection is not formed in partial awareness. The text argues that to pay attention is to actively resist abstraction.
Say more about that.
When you pay attention, you are saying to the person in front of you, you are not a category. You are not a demographic. You are a human life. Attention, the author says, is a form of love.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here. Let me raise a very practical concern that I know leaders are feeling right now.
Go ahead.
When you are working in a community, especially a marginalized one, there are urgent, screaming needs.
Yes.
There is systemic poverty.
Yeah.
There is opioid addiction. There are families in immediate crisis facing eviction tomorrow. When the house is literally, figuratively on fire, slowing down to practice the spiritual discipline of attention, to linger and observe and ask questions.
It feels wrong.
It can feel incredibly inefficient, if not downright irresponsible. How do we justify this slow pace of attention when people are drowning right now?
It is the most common pushback, and it is a completely understandable human reaction. When there is a crisis, our instinct is to act, not to sit and watch. But the author systematically dismantles this false idol of speed.
The idol of speed.
We equate speed with effectiveness. But the text argues a specific sequence. Are you ready?
Let's hear it.
Speed produces assumptions. Assumptions produce distortion. And distortion produces shallow and sometimes harmful interventions.
Wow. So rushing to put out the fire might actually mean we were throwing gasoline on it because we didn't take the time to notice what was actually burning.
Exactly. When we rush, we default to those generic, placeless models we talked about earlier. We offer solutions before we have even done the work of listening.
Because we think we already know the answer.
Right. And the author points back to the life of Jesus to validate this. If anyone had a mission with cosmic urgency, it was Christ. He had 3 years to change the trajectory of human history. Yet reading the Gospels, you never get the sense that Jesus was in a rush.
He was always walking.
He was walking, and more importantly, he allowed himself to be interrupted constantly.
I hear that, and theologically it's beautiful. I really mean that.
Yeah.
But I have to push back again from a modern organizational standpoint.
Okay, hit me.
Sure, Jesus had time to walk slowly. He didn't have an oversight committee.
That's fair.
But my nonprofit board needs a quarterly report next week. My donors want to see how many meals we served this month. If I tell them, hey guys, we didn't serve as many meals because we were practicing the spiritual discipline of attention, I'm going to lose my funding. How do I balance that?
That is the daily tension of modern leadership. But the text isn't suggesting that we abandon all action to just sit in a drum circle and stare at each other.
Well, that's a relief.
What it argues is that if your metrics force you to move so fast that you stop treating people like humans, your metrics are broken.
Oaken metrics. Okay.
Let's look at how the text illustrates this with the story of the woman with the issue of blood. Jesus is on his way to heal a dying girl, the daughter of a synagogue leader named Jairus.
Okay, so a literal life or death emergency.
We're absolute emergency. The crowd is crushing him. It is chaotic.
A high-stakes, incredibly urgent objective.
But a chronically ill, marginalized woman touches the hem of his garment. According to the purity laws of the time, her chronic bleeding made her socially and religiously untouchable. She was an outcast.
Right.
From a managerial perspective, stopping for her is an interruption to the primary urgent objective of saving the dying girl.
It's the ultimate distraction.
But Jesus stops in the middle of the chaos. He stops the entire procession to pay attention to this single, hidden, bleeding woman. He forces the invisible to become visible. To Jesus, her life deserved more than his haste.
Your life deserves more than my haste. That is a devastatingly beautiful standard.
And it has profound implications for organizations today. If you prioritize speed over attention to satisfy a quarterly report, what happens to your organization?
It changes you.
You inevitably begin to speak in abstract, generic terms. You stop knowing the names of the people you are actually serving. You become obsessed with optics because optics are the only things you can measure quickly.
And the community feels it. People inherently know when they're being managed as part of a speedy, efficient process rather than being truly seen and attended to as individuals.
Oh, absolutely.
It goes back to that psychological erosion of trust we discussed. If I feel like I'm just a box you are checking to hit your quota for the month, I will never, ever trust you with my real pain.
Distrust is the inevitable harvest of a distracted organization.
So bringing all this together, if we agree that we must be rooted in a specific place, that we must use the lens of compassion, and that we must ruthlessly fight distraction to actually pay attention.
Right.
When we finally slow down and look around, what exactly are we looking for?
Well, this moves us into the real practical application of all this theology, community mapping, and discovering the hidden architecture.
Now, when I hear the phrase community mapping, my brain immediately goes to a boardroom.
Yep, the big screens.
Yeah, I picture an urban planner or a marketing executive pulling up a digital map layered with demographic data, median income brackets, crime heat maps, and age distribution charts.
That is the secular, technical definition of mapping. And the author acknowledges that there is a place for data. It's not evil.
Right.
But the text reclaims the concept entirely. It outlines community mapping, not as a technical exercise in demographics, but as a rigorous discipline of attention. It is described as a way of asking for the insight to interpret our surroundings faithfully.
The text makes a really vital distinction here between mapping as surveillance and control and mapping as an act of humility and love. What is the difference?
Surveillance mapping is extractive. It is what a corporation does to figure out how to sell you more shoes.
Okay. Yeah.
It treats the community as an object to be analyzed so that it can be managed, marketed to, or fixed according to the organization's agenda. It is rooted in a desire for power and efficiency.
Right. It's about extracting value or achieving a metric.
Exactly. Mapping through the eyes of Christ, or mapping with true compassion, is entirely different. It is responsive, not extractive. You aren't mapping to figure out how to force your program onto the neighborhood. You are mapping to uncover what the author calls the hidden architecture of a place so that you can serve it humbly.
It's the difference between looking at a house's fresh coat of paint versus looking at its structural blueprints.
Oh, I love that. Take that further. How does that play out in a neighborhood?
Well, if you look at the paint, it tells you what looks nice today. It tells you the surface level aesthetic.
Yeah,
That's like looking at demographic data. It tells you the median age is 34 and the average income is $50,000. It's true, but it's surface.
right.
But if you look at the structural blueprint, it tells you which walls are actually load-bearing. If you knock out a load-bearing wall, the whole house collapses no matter what color it's painted. In a community, you have to find the load-bearing people and the load-bearing spaces.
The author actually walks the reader through the specific, piercing questions we must ask to find those load-bearing elements. And let me tell you, these are not questions you can answer with a quick Google search or a census report.
Let's go through some of them because they are incredibly specific and deeply human.
Okay, so the text asks, who arrives early to the neighborhood and who leaves late?
Who is doing the invisible labor? Who is commuting 2 hours before dawn to clean the office buildings?
Exactly. It also asks, where do people gather naturally? And importantly, it notes, not just where the church or the organization wants them to gather.
That is a huge one. Let's say we build $1 million community center with a basketball court and a computer lab, and we get incredibly frustrated when the teenagers still prefer to hang out on the corner by the rundown convenience store.
Right. Why aren't they using our gym?
Exactly. The hidden architecture says the convenience store is the real gathering space, regardless of our beautiful architecture. If we want to connect with them, we have to go to the convenience store, not demand they come to our shiny new building.
It's so true. It also asks, who is influential without being official?
The load-bearing people.
Yes.
It's not necessarily the mayor or the police chief or the head pastor. In a dense urban center, it might be the bodega owner who knows everyone's order and spots people cash when they are short.
Exactly.
Or in a suburb, it might be the grandmother who has lived on the block for 40 years, who sits on her porch and watches everyone's kids, and who knows every single secret in a 3-block radius.
Oh, she knows everything.
If the grandmother on the porch doesn't trust your organization, nobody on that street is going to trust your organization.
You have to locate where the trust actually resides. The text also asks us to identify the invisible boundaries of shame. Where are the places people avoid? What are the stories of hope, or the stories of repeated failure that the community is telling itself? What wounds have become so common, they are completely normalized.
It's asking us to read the emotional and spiritual topography of the streets, not just the physical layout.
And if you take this seriously, it completely upends how you launch a new initiative. You realize that you cannot discover this hidden blueprint on a 2-day weekend leadership retreat.
No way.
You can't hire a consultant to figure it out for you in a month.
You actually have to be there.
You have to stay. Uncovering this hidden architecture requires the absolute most difficult discipline in modern leadership, the willingness to simply stay put.
Staying put, I mean, it sounds so incredibly boring. It sounds so contrary to everything we are taught about ambition, scaling up, and, changing the world.
The author labels this the seduction of the impressive.
The seduction of the impressive.
There is a constant temptation for leaders to dream globally while neglecting locally. We are lured by the idea of large numbers, viral influence, broad platforms, and scalable models. We want to be part of a massive movement.
We want to write a best-selling book about how we transformed a city in 3 easy steps.
Exactly. But the text offers a very sobering warning against that ambition. It argues that true kingdom work, or translated into secular terms, true transformative systemic change.
Yeah.
It is very often unimpressive, incredibly slow, and almost entirely hidden. It happens in living rooms, at bus stops, in clinic waiting rooms, and in the quiet moments of shared grief.
I'm going to push back one more time because this hits a nerve for anyone running an organization, whether it's a charity, a business, or a church.
Let's do it.
We live in a world governed by metrics. Donors want to see return on investment. Board members want to see growth charts.
It's reality.
If we agree that we can't easily measure things like trust or faithful presence or listening on a spreadsheet, how do we know we aren't just failing miserably and comforting ourselves by calling it hidden fruit?
That's a very fair question.
How do we avoid using local faithfulness as a convenient excuse for incompetence or stagnation?
That is the essential tension. The analysis here is not that we should abandon all metrics, burn our spreadsheets, and just wander around aimlessly.
Okay.
The argument is that the metrics themselves must change to reflect the reality of human transformation. Growth matters, but we must ask much harder, much deeper questions than simply how many people showed up to our event.
So what do those new metrics actually look like?
We must ask, is our organization becoming a place that people in this neighborhood actually trust with their real lives?
Oh,
Are we known for being safe or just for being busy? The text defines faithfulness as the courage to stay.
the courage to stay.
Are we staying through the inevitable misunderstandings? Are we staying when the initial novelty of our program fades and the community seems totally indifferent? Are we staying when the work is painfully slow and nobody is applauding us?
Measuring your success by your willingness to endure being ignored or misunderstood by the very people you are trying to help. That is a terrifying metric.
It is terrifying because it completely removes our ego from the equation. And this leads to perhaps the most profound theological shift the author suggests, which completely rewrites the DNA of most missional organizations.
What's the shift?
We have this inherited, almost colonial assumption that we are bringing God into a godless space. We arrive in a broken neighborhood like saviors carrying the light into the darkness.
Cue the dramatic superhero music. We have arrived to fix you.
The text argues the exact opposite. We do not bring God anywhere. God is already there.
Already there.
He has always been there, working in quiet, hidden ways long before our organization incorporated or our church planted its flag. He is present in the resilience of a single mother, in the hidden generosity between neighbors, in the survival of the marginalized.
So our job isn't to be the savior.
Our job is to learn how to see the grace that is already stirring in the dirt and to humbly ask if we can join it. It is a posture of profound humility.
A total flip.
We move from an arrogant colonial mindset of fixing a neighborhood to a reverent incarnational mindset of dwelling within it. We become humble participants in a story that was already being written.
That completely dismantles the savior complex. If grace is already at work in the hidden architecture, in the load-bearing people we haven't even bothered to meet yet, then our frantic rushing and our standardized programs aren't just inefficient. They might actually be trampling over the delicate work that is already happening.
Shifting our vision from metrics to mercy and from frantic speed to sustained, patient presence does not just transform the community we are trying to serve. It fundamentally transforms the people doing the serving. The organization becomes more human, more humble, and more truthful.
Which brings us to the end of this incredibly dense, challenging deep dive. And I want to talk directly to you, the listener, for a moment.
Yeah, this is for you.
Whether you are the CEO leading a massive international nonprofit, whether you are volunteering a few hours a week at a local food bank, or whether you are simply trying to be a better, more connected neighbor on your own street, this framework we've discussed today changes absolutely everything.
It demands a total reorientation of how we walk through the world.
The people you walk past every single day, the ones waiting for the bus, the ones stocking the shelves, the ones you avoid eye contact with on the sidewalk, they are not background characters in the movie of your life.
No, they aren't.
They're not demographics. They're not data points for your next grant proposal. They are endlessly complex individuals carrying invisible wounds and hidden stories that deserve your attention, not just your haste.
To synthesize the core message of the source material, the mission field, wherever yours happens to be, is not an empty void waiting for your brilliant strategy.
Right.
It is already crowded with life, with deep grief, and with hidden grace. The very first act of true obedience, the first step to making any real difference, is not to launch a new program or draft a new mission statement or scale your operations.
No.
The first act is to simply stop, to look again, and to learn to see truthfully.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Think about the physical place that you consider the most mundane or maybe even the most frustrating in your daily routine.
Think of it clearly.
Maybe it's that soul-crushing stretch of highway on your daily commute. Maybe it's the fluorescent-lit aisle of your local grocery store. Or maybe it's that awkward, disconnected block in your own neighborhood where nobody ever talks to each other.
Consider looking at that exact spot through a completely different lens today.
What if that exact, boring, frustrating spot is already entirely saturated with a hidden, profound grace, and you just haven't put on the night vision goggles to see it yet? What if you are standing in a crowded room, totally convinced you are alone, simply because you haven't learned how to open your eyes?
It is a question worth carrying with you.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a moment today to stop, look around, and truly see the people right in front of you.